What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you're excited because we have less than a week to go. We've been saying this for a couple of days now, less than a week until the Dallas Cowboys are practicing during training camp out in Oxnard, California. It is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be there myself starting next Sunday, July, what is that, the 30th. I'll be there for a week with my friends from San Antonio Sports Star. I'll be putting some stuff up here on the YouTube channel, obviously all over bloggingtheboys.com on our podcast network. And make sure to check out San Antonio Sports Star. There will be lots of interviews, lots of fun times. And if you're going to be out there, let me know, and hopefully we can meet up and maybe bump fists or something cool. Today, we are here for the final installment of our BTB training camp preview series. We've been doing this for what feels like 10 months now, but at least a couple of weeks. Each and every couple of days, we've been looking at different position groups on the Cowboys, asking questions, figuring things out, trying to answer some questions, and kind of assessing how we feel about this team, what with training camp now about to start. Because the thing with camp starting is that that's it, right? Like the time to kind of put this together is really in the rear view mirror. Yes, this is the time for the Cowboys to work and figure things out now, not just on the field, but off of it with regards to all of the pending contractual situations. The Zach Martin thing, obviously, kind of bubbling up to the surface this past week. But it would not be fair to kind of look at the team if we didn't look at the very top of the coaching staff. Now, for full perspective, because apparently a Zach Martin domino can fall at any moment in time in the news cycle. I'm recording this on Friday, July 21st. 2023. It is 10:17 a.m. Central Standard Time as I do this. So without further ado, let's get to it. The Cowboys coaching staff, and we're only going to look at the top, right? The kind of main coaches involved, obviously, with the Cowboys and the success that we hope they have here in 2023. And to do that, we have to look at them. Now, Mike McCarthy is, of course, the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, entering his fourth season with the team. Brian Schottenheimer, the team's new offensive coordinator, what with Kellen Moore's departure. Mike McCarthy is the play caller. We'll get to that in a moment. Dan Quinn, for his third season as the Cowboys defensive coordinator, is around, and John Fassel, the team's special teams coordinator. Now, I want to talk about Mike McCarthy because there are two things that I feel like just kind of grind my gears, have been a pet peeve of mine. The first is that way back, I said 10 months, almost 10 months, half of that, 5 months ago at the NFL Combine, Mike McCarthy took to the podium and said, "We want to run the ball." And this is the only thing that anybody in the national media heard Mike McCarthy say this offseason, right? Everybody is so stuck on this. Anywhere you look, anywhere you listen, hopefully it's all throughout Blogging the Boys or, other fabulous content creators around the internet. But anywhere you kind of look, people are like, well, Mike McCarthy wants to run the ball. The Cowboys, they really want to do it. They want to grind things down. They want to, move the chains. They want to rest that defense. A week after, I've said this 1,000 times, if you've watched our stuff or listened to me, a week, literally 1 week after Mike McCarthy said this, the Cowboys cut Ezekiel Elliott and traded for Brandon Cooks. But they want to run the ball, right? And I'm not going to sit here and say that I think the Cowboys are going to throw the ball 40 times a game, but this idea that they want to be, an Army-Navy matchup is ridiculous to me. And it's low-hanging fruit. Mike McCarthy is not perfect, right? But I do think that he is underrated. And some of that is his general sort of reputation, because the man lost a PR battle to Aaron Rodgers, and the whole football collective kind of sided with Aaron on that. Anything that the Green Bay Packers did in that era, only Aaron Rodgers is responsible for. The good things, right? The bad things are all Mike McCarthy's fault. That's kind of the rap that we've heard for the last few years now. But so beyond the fact that Mike McCarthy is kind of an easy punching bag for a lot of people, he's the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And that post is obviously one of extreme polarization. And so when you put all those things together, nobody wants to take Mike McCarthy seriously. Nobody wants to kind of give him a chance. And I think that's really unfair. And we can sit here and we can talk about how the standard for the Cowboys has fallen, how once upon a time they were winning Super Bowls, and that's what it's all about. That's true. I'm not here to kind of deny that winning the Super Bowl is the most important thing. But if we're honest with ourselves, this century, right, throughout the Super Bowl drought, they've been pretty hard times, right? And like it's been hard to kind of see the Cowboys have success. Mike McCarthy, I mentioned, is entering his fourth season with the team. His team has improved each and every single year. That first one obviously was very difficult for a number of different reasons, but we talked about it. Mike McCarthy's Cowboys last year were a playoff team in back-to-back seasons. The first time that had happened to the Cowboys since 2006 and 2007. They won double-digit games in back-to-back seasons for the first time since 1995 and 1996, literally the entire drought. And so, again, I'm not saying let's build a statue for Mike McCarthy, let's hold a parade, let's hang a banner, but he has done some things with this team that are incredibly foreign to this organization, and we don't give him any credit for that. There's enough credit to go around. We can give it to Dan Quinn, we can give it to Kellen Moore, we can give it to Dak Prescott and Micah Parsons and all sorts of different people, but we can also give Mike McCarthy his fair share. Now, I mentioned it as we put the coaching staff, the top of it again, on the screen one more time. Mike McCarthy is entering his fourth season as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. That number is significant in my personal and humble opinion. I wrote about this a few weeks ago at our site. In the Jerry Jones era, which, is the modern era of the Dallas Cowboys, beginning in 1989. In the Jerry Jones era, there are only two head coaches who reached a fifth season with the team, right? So I hope that point makes sense. Of all the head coaches who Jerry Jones has employed to run the Dallas Cowboys as the head coach, only two of them have made it to a fifth year. The first was Jimmy Johnson, who coached exactly 5 years with the Cowboys and is an obvious exception for obvious reasons. The other is Jason Garrett, who was a favorite and sort of chosen son of the organization. So my point here is that Mike McCarthy is entering his fourth season, and that most head coaches in the Jerry Jones era do not get to a fifth year. Now, some of that is also coincidence. Bill Parcells moved on. So you've kind of got that as a part of this. But again, it sort of emphasizes how big of a season the Cowboys are approaching and how big of a narrative sort of monster it is for certain people. Mike McCarthy certainly chief among them. But let's talk about, sort of an extension of Mike McCarthy quickly, and that's offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer. And I don't mean to be disrespectful. I don't mean to diminish the role that Schottenheimer can provide and will provide as the team's offensive coordinator, but Mike McCarthy is the play caller, right? That's really what this ultimately comes down to. Brian Schottenheimer is in charge of the weekly installs because McCarthy's going to be handling head coaching duties and things like that. But this isn't, there are a lot of people who look at Brian Schottenheimer's past with the New York Jets or with the Seattle Seahawks, outside of the incredibly productive time that they had in 2020, by the way, from an offensive standpoint. And there are people who kind of, nitpick and poke and say that Brian Schottenheimer is not a great offensive coordinator. And he may not be. He may be amazing. But the reality is he is not this team's offensive play caller. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that his role is meaningless. He offers nothing. He's just, standing on the side. But this is Mike McCarthy's offense. That's really what this ultimately comes down to. And Brian Schottenheimer is a Mike McCarthy guy, which is why it is valuable that he is the person who is holding the offensive coordinator position. I think we should all be fair and admit that things are going to be a little bit different without Kellen Moore. And I know that Kellen is not and has not been the most popular person with Dallas Cowboys fans, but you have to consider, most of us here, I think, recognize that Dak Prescott is pretty good, right? However you want to define that is up to you, whether you think he's the seventh or eighth or whatever best quarterback in the NFL. We all know that Dak Prescott has had highly productive seasons as a passer in the NFL. And it is worth mentioning that they have all mostly effectively come with Kellen Moore as his offensive coordinator, as his play caller. Kellen Moore took over as the Cowboys offensive coordinator in 2019. That was when Dak Prescott really kind of took a leap, took a step as far as passing abilities in the NFL. But it's also worth mentioning, and I don't know that we've talked about this enough, but Dak Prescott has never been a Dallas Cowboy without Kellen Moore around in some capacity, right? Because Kellen Moore was his teammate early on in 2016 and 2017. And then in 2018, Kellen obviously joined the staff as the quarterback's coach. And then in 19, as mentioned, became the offensive coordinator. So this is the first time that Dak Prescott has been a Cowboy, has been a professional, has been anywhere other than Mississippi State, basically. You catch my drift, without Kellen Moore in his ear to some degree. So it will be different. It will look strange. There may be some hiccups along the way, and we have to be patient for that. But a place where there won't be any of that is obviously on the defensive side of the ball. Dan Quinn, the best defensive coordinator in the NFL, arguably. I mean, you can have that argument if you want, but I think most of us, if we had to pick the very best, it's fair to side with Dan Quinn. I love Dan Quinn. Sometimes I think the negative attention on Mike McCarthy sort of lends to too much credit for Dan Quinn, but that's a different discussion. Dan Quinn is amazing, and it's impossible to argue with the results that the Cowboys have had under his guidance on the defensive side of the ball, that is, because prior to 2021, the Cowboys weren't a team that had a great defense, right? That never happened. We were never a team that was, you could trust this defense. If you look at any, season of Cowboys success this century before Dan Quinn's arrival, they were always teams with extremely great, extremely good offenses that just kind of hung on for dear life on the defensive side of the ball. Dan Quinn has changed that, and Dan Quinn has made it so that is the strength of the Dallas Cowboys, and it's been partly obviously aided by the arrival of Micah Parsons and other talent kind of rising to the occasion. So many great players, so many great pass rushers, but it's also been the utilization of different players as well. Dan Quinn, kind of early to the trend of utilizing his safeties as these linebackers, the way he uses Jaron Curse, and we've seen him be really, really creative. And so where is the weakness, right? Like, where is the weakness in Dan Quinn's game? And also, Dan Quinn got the first round pick, Mozzie Smith, who's kind of flying under the radar right now. It's, a year ago, we talked so much about regression of the mean. The Cowboys, there's no way they get as many takeaways. That's not going to happen. And they proved us wrong. And I don't know that they're going to be able to do that another year in a row. I don't know that they're going to be able to have as many sacks. But I'm at a place now where, the proof is in the pudding. The proof of concept is well here. I mean, the Cowboys are very capable of having a successful defense, even if the turnover numbers aren't there, even if the sack numbers aren't there. Dan Quinn is somebody who we obviously trust. We trust the players. We trust the talent. So, I haven't been this excited about the Dallas Cowboys defense in a very long time, if that isn't obvious. Finally, special teams. We've got John Fassel. It's weird, the kind of landscape of special teams in the NFL these days, what with how the league has changed some rules to kind of, diminish the value of special teams in certain senses, right? Punt returns, really specifically kickoff returns, are kind of getting phased more and more out of the game. And I think one of the biggest questions, I know this is about John Fassel, but is whether or not the Cowboys are going to keep Kevontae Turpin around, right? Because that's sort of his biggest contribution to the team. Now, whether he develops and grows in a role on offense obviously remains to be seen. That's part of what we're going to learn over the next couple of weeks. But John Fassel, sort of has his work cut out for him, right? Like, he can be a bit interesting in terms of how he approaches things, and obviously had a high level of loyalty to Greg Zuerlein before, two off seasons ago, I guess. And a year ago, I've said this many times, the Cowboys had Jonathan Garibay and Lareem Hyrule, who was their kickers. And so now, I would say John Fassel's biggest challenge outside of finding ways to get the most out of Kevontae Turpin, if the Cowboys are going to continue to employ him as a returner, is what are they going to do at kicker? That's John Fassel's one job right now, right? It was not a good training camp for kickers last year. And it was so bad that, again, Brett Maher had to be plucked out of thin air and wound up saving them. But the Cowboys were awful at training camp last year from a kicking standpoint. They were awful in the preseason. So that is something that John Fassel has to figure out. He is somebody who, again, I think we all have our patience tested with at times, but I think ultimately I would much rather have John Fassel than not, because he is an aggressive special teams head coach or special teams coordinator, whatever you want to call it, because he lives by aggression. And I love that. I will live and die by that sword all day long instead of being conservative. We've seen that work out in many different ways for the Cowboys. We've seen it burn them a couple of times, but I like a coach who's more willing to kind of go for it than who just wants to kind of sit and chill on the side. So in that respect, I'm a big fan of John Fassel. I love this coaching staff. It's one of the better ones the Cowboys have fielded in recent memory. And it's got some big time questions, obviously, that kind of hover around the offensive side of the ball, but I think we're all willing to kind of believe that it's going to work itself out. And that's a really exciting thing. So with that, our BTB training camp preview series is over. It's concluded. Boom. Done. Training camp basically here. It is super exciting. Obviously, we've been kind of counting down the days, counting down the weeks until real football is starting to happen on a regular basis. And we are less than a week away from it happening, which is super duper exciting. My name is RJ Ochoa. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram or Threads at RJ Ochoa, on TikTok at rj.ochoa. If you would like to send me an email, you can do so at rj.ochoa@sbnation.com, or you can leave a comment down below and we'll do our best to get to those. Also, we did it. We made it. I'm proud of us, proud of you, proud of me. Congratulations to us all. The good times are finally here, and now it's just about the football of it all. And there's a lot of questions within that, but as they arise, as things continue to happen, we will of course have you covered here on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Check us out at blogontheboys.com, our podcast network. We have all sorts of stuff coming out all the time because all of us around here, just like you, are obsessed with the Dallas Cowboys. It's all we want to talk about 24/7, 365. So thanks so much for hanging out, everybody. We'll see you next time.